Hello, my name is Mark McCulley, CEO of the American Angus Association. And as a membership-driven organization, one of the most important tools we have is our surveys from time to time to hear from our members, to get guidance, to get input, and to get ideas on how we improve as an organization moving forward. You know, the last membership survey that was done was actually back in 2016. It was a significant survey at the time. It really guided the development of the 2016 Long-Range Strategic Plan. And I went back into that survey and looked at some of those results, and some of the things that you as members told us then were the highest priorities for this organization and this breed moving forward. Very specifically, one of the questions was asked around the top 5 areas of emphasis for the breed. And I think it's interesting to look at what members told us then, traits they ranked at the time: fertility, feet and leg structure, cow longevity, feed efficiency, and health. And then I look at where we are today, and I look at the progress that and the advancements that we've made in genetic selection tools and the number of tools that have been added to the Angus toolbox since this survey was taken. And it was a direct reflection of what we heard from members then that has truly guided our planning process and our priorities as an organization moving forward. And that's how we use these surveys, and I think a great reflection of what you told us back in time and how that's directed the work of this organization overall as we've moved forward. You know, the survey really has a couple different goals, but largely we just want to better understand. We want to hear how members prefer to interact with the association. There's lots of tools, and we'll get into some of the different ways that members prefer and the frequency of members, how often they interact with the association. And then we also want to understand priorities, understand what the members are seeing in their operation today, and where the members, maybe most importantly, are seeing the future of this organization and their operation moving forward. And then we also want to make sure that what we're doing today and what we're planning to do tomorrow is in fact meeting needs, right? And making sure that we're aligning our priorities and our focus in planning to make sure we as an association are where our members need us to be as we look down the road. So we'll break this survey down, and I'll tell you there's a lot of detail and a lot more into the survey results than we're going to be able to cover in this presentation. But I'm going to cover some basics of, first off, who did we hear from, right? And what were kind of the demographics of those that responded to our survey. We'll get into some of this different ways and frequency that members interact with the association, some preferred methods. And then very importantly, those questions around priorities of value and services and programs for the association as we move forward. These are very key, and we'll come back to this of how we'll use this data later, but be very important as we're in the strategic planning process, how our board continues to pore over this data and inform decisions that we make today and moving forward. So the survey, for those of you that remember, was opened back in April 15th of 2025, and we kept that survey open for several months. It was emailed directly out to about 23,000 members. We also included some of our affiliate members and commercial producers that use our services, you know, specifically that interact with AGI on a frequent basis, or Angus Link. And then we also shared the opportunity to connect with this survey through the journal, through the AJ Daily, on our website, through social channels and other way. In the end, we had about 1,200 members respond, which was about a 20% response rate, which of course we'd like to hear from everyone, but as surveys go and as we reflect back on previous or historical surveys, that was a great response. And we're really proud that we had that many members that were willing to take the time to share their ideas and their input in this very, very important tool. So let's get into it. Maybe one of the most interesting and maybe somewhat surprising pieces of data that came out of the survey was, as we looked at those responding to the survey, specifically our members, one of the questions that we got into was, how long have you been a member of the association? So we had 43% of the members had been with the association for 20 plus years. But on the other side, we had 23% of our members that have been with the association for 5 years or less. You know, and that really shapes, I think, as we step back and think about that data in particular, we understand length of time with the association really shapes perspective and knowledge about what we do, why we do it, the programs that are available, and that was a really, really interesting and I think a key finding as we first dived into these results. Looking at that just a little bit deeper, we had 10% of our respondents that have been with the association, been members for less than 2 years. Going up to the other side there, I mentioned earlier, 43% that had been 20 plus year members or more. And then that affiliate member that I mentioned earlier, 2% of the survey respondents would have identified themselves as affiliates. We understand that age of our member, maybe most, we anticipate, maybe most influences method of communication or preferred ways of interacting with the association. So it was important to understand who was answering this survey in terms of age. Nearly half of the respondents were 61 years of age or older. We had about a quarter of our respondents that were 44 years or younger. It's interesting that 21% that were 70 years or older, about 70% of those had been members for 20 plus years. So again, a very nice diverse group of respondents. We were a little lightly sampled on the youngest of our age categories. We did not sample juniors. We specifically looked for 21 years of age or older, and we had, but only 4% of our respondents were in that 21 to 28 year of age window. So we'll keep that in mind as we look at some of this data as we move forward. We asked survey respondents, what does their operation look like? And what we heard was 33% of them said they are registered Angus cattle only. Another 28% said they're primarily registered Angus cattle, but maybe they run some commercial cattle on the side along with those registered cows. We had a 10% said they were registered Angus cattle, and they also run some other breeds as well. And we had 22% that said they were primarily commercial, but raised some registered Angus cattle. And then we had a 6% that would have said they fell in the category of they ran multiple registered breeds, and they also ran some registered cattle. So again, some fairly nice diversity in terms of those that represent the American Angus Association membership. So kind of in summary, we said there was about 61% would have said they were exclusively or primarily registered Angus breeders, and then about a 39% we would say would have been kind of more commercially focused or working in more heavily in some of the other registered breeds. We got some ideas of scope and size of operation. We had about 23% of the respondents operate with 25 cows or less, and about 47% operate with 26 to 100 cows. And we saw, again, 23% with about 100 to 400 cows, and then about 8% of the respondents would be running 400 cows or more. So again, some very nice diversity of size of operation, as we would expect when we talk to our members. I want to point out, and this is something that we talk about a fair amount, and you maybe have seen us share as the association when we break our membership down. And this is a little bit of an apples to oranges comparison to the data I showed you previously, and so we want to be a little careful with it. But it does always remind us that we look at our association makeup and take last year, for example, 12,000 active members that registered over 300,000 head of cattle with us. About 76% of those active members registered 19 head or less, and they comprise 16.5% of our herd book. On the other end of that, we had about 5% of those active members that registered 100 head or more, which made up over half of our herd book. Now, this can be a little bit deceiving. We also have junior members that would be included in that, in these data, of course. We also understand that we would have multiple members operating under one operation, and maybe when they take the survey, they probably think about the total operation. When we break their data out, we're looking at them as an individual member. But it's just interesting to look at this and compare as we sort through the data and think about our association. When we asked about the primary market of focus, about half of the respondents say their primary market of focus is selling registered bulls to commercial cow-calf producers. That's the market that they would make most of their decisions with that market in mind. 24% said it's about selling registered bulls and females to other registered breeders, so about a quarter of the respondents. 11%, the third highest ranked market of focus, was direct to consumer. And I think about how that has changed over the years. That would not have been nearly as high or even hardly made the radar just 5, 10, 15 years ago, of course. And so, again, speaks to the prominence of that. Of course, we had some folks that really focused on the junior cattle or show cattle, about 5%. And then we had, again, some of those that really are more our commercially oriented folks that would say their focus or primary market of focus were feeder cattle, or maybe they don't sell registered cattle. So again, a majority of our respondents would primarily sell or exclusively sell registered Angus cattle. About half of our respondents said that their focus is selling registered bulls to commercial cow-calf producers. And as I mentioned earlier, that growth in the direct-to-consumer market is notable, especially when you break that data out and look at some of our smaller producers. That's become a very viable and important market for their operation. Okay, so let's get into, that's who answered the survey. Now let's get into a little bit of what they told us. And one of the things we wanted to dig through and understand is how do members interact with the association? So first we looked at frequency. And the answer they told us was about half said that periodically throughout the year they interact with the association. Now, I think there's maybe a bit of a caveat there, and with all surveys, we always have to be a little careful of maybe how folks interpreted the question or thought about the question as they gave their answer. So interact may mean different things to different people, whether they mean that as a direct personal contact or whether that's simply checking in on the website. Again, folks probably answered that question a little bit differently. So we'll be a little careful, I think, as we make too many conclusions with this. But I think what was interesting is the majority of our members that answered this said periodically throughout the year they check in. I think most notably, though, as we think about making sure we stay connected and our members stay informed, about 12% of our members say it's one time a year that they interact with the association. On the other end of that, we have about 13% that interact weekly. Now, it starts to make some sense when you break that interaction down by herd size. It makes some sense that you would assume the larger operations, so in this case, as we've broken them out, the 400 head or more, they interact with the association. Almost a third of them, 34%, interact with the association on a weekly basis, right? And that makes sense. But then when we get down to that once a year, again, some of our smaller producers, but even some of our large producers, it's once a year they interact with the associations. We always want to keep that in mind, again, as we think about that frequency and how we best make sure that those members are as informed as they want to be. Now, maybe one of the most important things that we wanted to understand and hear from our members is how do members want to get their information, right? And this was really the question we asked. We wanted to say, how do you get your news and information about Angus? And we asked them to pick the top 3 preferred methods. And we heard 13 different platforms that were identified as certain members' preferred method of communication and their source of information. The top 3, however, 47% said the print Angus Journal. That is the half of our respondents says that's where they prefer to get their information about their association and the Angus breed. Not surprising, and that's good because we definitely treat the Angus Journal as that is the flagship publication of the American Angus Association, and that is our methodology today of the communication and pieces of information that we want to make sure our members know about. We work through the Angus Journal. But 45, very close behind, 45% said emails, direct emails or login message center notes would be how they prefer to interact and get their news and information. 34% said the website. That was third, prefer to go to angus.org, check in there and get their news and information. But again, digging a little deeper into those 13 different methods that were identified for our members, I do think it's important. We've worked hard to produce a lot of different platforms to meet our members where they are, to deliver the information on a platform and in a way that our members prefer to consume it. We know this has changed over time, right? 10, 15 years ago, we would not have had this many options listed on a slide of ways to get Angus news. There again, I mentioned earlier, if we look at our two print publications in Angus Journal, and while Angus Beef Bulletin is really designed to be a tool to deliver information and news to our commercial customer, quite a few identified that as one of their primary or their preferred methods to get Angus news about the breed, about the association. We have a number of digital platforms. I mentioned angus.org. Of course, the Angus Beef Bulletin and the Angus Journal online versions or digital versions were identified by many as one of their preferred methods. I mentioned earlier those direct association emails are very popular. Login announcements, our Inside Angus emails that go out. And then a kind of a group of what we've labeled as other, but social media. A number of folks identified social media, and we didn't dig into the different platforms of social media, whether that's Facebook or Instagram or others. But a number preferred that's where they go to want to get their news. The Angus mobile app, their regional managers, direct communication with their regional managers. We now have podcasts and the Angus Conversation and Angus at Work. And then, of course, we have things we do like this on AngusTV through YouTube videos. So a lot of options out there, a lot of preferred options by different members. And we'll continue to use all of these different platforms and use them as effectively as we can. One interesting note, we probably expected to see a lot of differences here when we started looking at either age of the respondent or looking at maybe years as a member. And we really didn't see a lot of difference. Slight re-ranking from 1 to 2 to 2 to 3, but not major shifts at all. Now also remember, and you point back to the statistic I shared earlier, our 21 to 25-year-old was pretty lightly sampled in this particular survey. So I think we're going to have to keep that in mind as we think about 5, 10 years down the road. I think we all understand the prevalence of digital communication, social media, getting information on our personal devices. But we still hear that print is where you as members want to get your information, and we're still fully committed to moving in that direction for sure. So we asked about services of value, programs of value, right? And we asked our respondents to pick the top 5 services or programs that we currently offer that they would find the most important and valuable to their operation. No surprise, 87% said pedigrees and the breed registry. Obviously, that is the core function of the American Angus Association, so not at all surprised that was number 1. It's very, very reasonable to expect that. Number 2 and number 3 were quite close in their ranking. Genetic evaluation and the selection tools, meaning our EPDs and our dollar value index, and then also genomic tests for seed stock. That rounded out our top 3 things that you told us as members that were most important and most valuable to you as association members. That then went down to member services, right? We've got an incredible team here at St. Joe. We still have been able to maintain a personal service and a personal connection. When you call 3201 Frederick, you will talk to some great folks that have a heart for your business, have an understanding of your business, and want to provide a service that you need. And so that's still something that we're highly, highly dedicated to, and we know you value that as important. Our AHIR programs, and then our Certified Angus Beef program rounded out, I think there are our top 6 in things that you told us that were most important. Here again, we looked at this data by years of being a member, by age, even by size of operation, where you would expect some of these things to maybe re-rank in a pretty big way. They really didn't. Again, some slight shifts, some slight re-ranking, but in general, the general answers tended to fit all of those different demographics. As we think about planning for the future, maybe one of the most important questions we ask our members is to give us some insight of what they see as potential barriers and potential threats to the Angus business, to their operation, and ultimately their family's livelihood moving forward. And we heard a lot of different ideas of some of those potential barriers. We asked them to narrow that down and to pick a top 5. The number one thing that we heard, and not surprising, was non-agricultural threats. Nearly half of the respondents said that things like urban disconnect, encroachment, animal rights, regulation, all the things that we know about that threaten agriculture every day were on the top of the minds of our respondents. Number 2 was ranch and generational transitions, and that was interesting that ranked up to number 2, I think, as families look at how are they going to make sure that the next generation is set up to take the reins. What's that look like? Of course, the questions that come with estate planning and death tax and all of the things that are looming out there that we, again, have some concerns about as we think about generational turnover. Then changes in the market trends and the economy. That could probably be interpreted as not only maybe consumer trends, but maybe specifically as we think about cattle supply and where our markets are at today, obviously in a very, very good situation versus maybe what they could be in the future if that should change. And then number 4 was, and very close behind, was financial. And I think if this is one of those, when we break it down by age of operator or years in the business, we tended to probably see this rank a little bit differently and candidly probably be interpreted a little bit differently. Obviously for our younger producers just getting started, it's probably going to be largely about access to capital. When we think about maybe those more established in the business, it's probably thinking about maybe profitability of the operation. This was one of those, we went back to our previous survey in 2016 because we had a very, very similar question, and by design we put some of the very much some of the similar items on the list. And just going back 10 years, the number one thing listed then was market trends and economy. 62% identified that as the biggest threat to their business. And I think that speaks the difference between where we are today and where we were then. If you think about obviously the market today, the prices that producers are enjoying and the profitability that we're enjoying, a very, very different situation than where we were in 2016. Non-ag threats ranked as number 2, but very similar in percentage, right there at about half of our respondents in 2016 identified that as a threat or a barrier to their business. And number 3 was competition with other proteins. A little lower ranking, but 29% at that time said that was the number 3 concern or threat to their operation moving forward. Interestingly enough, our ranch and generational transitions ranked as number 2. In this current survey response at 41%, it ranked number 7 in 2016 at only 22%. So we can definitely see a shift and a change at what's on the minds and maybe keeping some of our members up at night where we are today. Our group of respondents were optimistic. They saw a lot of opportunities. There was some 21 different opportunities that folks listed as one of the things they're most excited about and see opportunity to grow and expand the business in the future. Number 1, though, was selection tools to improve cow function, reproduction, and longevity. And I think it kind of mirrors where I started the presentation talking about some of the results that we heard back in 2016. There's still a desire for the association to work in this area and to continue to put tools in the hands of our registered breeders and ultimately our commercial producers to continue to make that Angus cow the backbone of the commercial industry. Number 2 was growing our market share. And again, that could probably be interpreted a little differently. That might be Angus's market share. That might be beef's market share. But we see a great opportunity there. We'll probably do it by number 3, growth in the USDA prime and the premium beef markets. That was identified by our respondents and our members to say, man, that's a place that we really see some opportunity for the breed and for their operation moving forward. And then some additional selection tools. You know, when we get into this area of are we going to be able to genetically identify these cattle that are maybe more disease resistant or a little more resilient, that was identified by our members as the number 4 opportunity. Then we come back into the market side and the demand creation side around premiums of certified Angus beef brand, some new technologies to improve and simplify data collection. We certainly hear that from members. We all know that everyone is time-strapped, and in this world of the registered business today, it seems there's more and more different phenotypic data points that need to be collected to advance the genetic evaluation, and it's not easy to collect, and it's certainly not easy to sit down and to work at the computer in the evening after a hard day's work and to get that information in. So new technologies around collecting the data and getting it into the evaluation ultimately is something you all identified as an opportunity. And then, of course, education popped up here on as I think, number 7. And so, again, we look at this data across age, across size of operation, market of focus, and there really wasn't a ton of difference. A little bit of re-ranking from one to the next. The larger operations tended to put more emphasis on the selection tools and things related to data, but largely the rankings and these big opportunities tended to be equally shared across the membership regardless of size or years in the business. And maybe one of the most important questions when we think about planning and charting a course for this American Angus Association through our long-range planning process, we ask the very specific question, what should we prioritize over the next 3 to 5 years? And again, different ways to maybe interpret some of this results. I tend to take it as some things that maybe ranked lower were things that hey, we're doing a really good job there, but by prioritizing, I want us to grow more in some of these other areas. And what you told us as members was 45%, the number 1 answer was marketing assistance. And again, I think this probably means different things to different people, but basically you are looking to the association to promote the breed, to put tools in your hands as to be marketers, to help you connect with customers. I think that probably also connects to commercial programs, marketing assistance on feeder cattle. So probably lots of things in there. That's probably something we're going to need to dig into. As number 2 was research. 43% of you as members said that is what you want the association to focus on. Here again, I think probably folks answered that question maybe thinking different things. It may be some more out on the cutting edge of research, some maybe more of the foundational research. What we know is that today, the land-grant institutions, and boy, there's some great ones out there doing some great work, but 15, 20, 30 years ago, I don't believe the members of the American Angus Association were looking to the association to be a driver of research. And yet today, 43% of our members say that's one of the most important priorities for this organization moving forward. Brand promotion of certified Angus beef and producer education were tied there at 3rd and 4th, and very, very close behind that was genetic selection tools as a priority for the association, the organization moving forward. And so again, all things that probably need a lot more questions asked to get more clarity around what our members maybe specifically need in each of these areas. But I think certainly set some great guideposts for the organization to think about and to prioritize as we move forward. So where do we go from here? This was a lot of great data, and as I said, there is a lot of more data that was not shared in this particular presentation, the way we break this data out in different ways. There was also some really fantastic comments. So we've got pages of comments. We left some questions open-ended, and those questions and your comments are being looked at by staff, board members, and we'll go through all of those individual comments, as will we as staff. Probably do some categorization, put them in different groups, but I'll promise you not one of those comments will be lost or not considered. We're going to keep analyzing the data because, as I said, there's plenty of places where we need to take a question, an answer to a question, and probably ask 3 more questions, right? And continue to break that out and to get more feedback. I mentioned the input that the board will have and the review of board and staff in this data. We've been continually building our long-range strategic plan. That this data is really important part of shaping with the assumptions we make about the future of this business and the prioritization of this organization as we move forward. And so I appreciate you tuning in and learning more about what we heard and what we learned from our members. I hope you will continue to reach out to us if you've got ideas and suggestions of how we get better. There was a lot of other specific questions in the survey that we asked about some very specific customer service things around handling of DNA samples, turnaround time, some things that frustrate you. So there were some pretty granular kind of things we really wanted to tease out. We've already been working on some of those results to make that process better. And again, in the end, I guess I want to just most invite you to stay connected, to stay engaged. And we try to provide, as shared earlier, a lot of ways to do that. There's a lot of ways that you can connect and interact with us. Of course, you can pick up the phone and give us a ring. I know our board members are very accessible. We as staff are very accessible, but we also have a lot of other methods out there. If you scan this QR code, that will take you to our website where you can check many of those out and get subscribed to them or learn more about them. So again, I thank you for tuning in and learning more about the survey, specifically for those that took the time, those 1,200 members that took the time to provide their thoughts and their insight and their feedback. I want to give you a special thank you. This is very valuable information, and I promise this is data that we will use to shape this organization moving forward. Thank you.